So sorry about the slight delay in the second part of this Egypt and Jordan trip. I picked up a little bit of a traveler's cold, and I wanted to memorialize the trip and not the cold. So after visiting Cairo, we flew, so from here in Cairo, up to Luxor, where we boarded a ship and started a float up the Nile. I know that's going south, but that's up the Nile because the Nile runs to the north. And on the first day, we visited two huge monuments on the east, the living side of the Nile. The first was the Temple of Amun at Karnak. It spans several pharaohs' rules, most of the New Kingdom, and is simply monumental in size. The shot in the lower left is in the hypostyle hall, featuring papyrus blossom columns that have sunken relief hieroglyphs that are just absolutely magnificent. There are also 134 closed papyrus columns still standing, and at the top, if you look between them, you can actually see there are even a few clerestory windows used for ventilation and light. On the right is our guide Aladdin. He did a great job of drawing examples in the sand. If you want to teach about hieroglyphs and architecture, the drawing skill can be a huge asset. So if you were thinking about drawing skill, I suggest Art 121. The second site that we visited was Luxor Temple, built by Ramses II, and these are all statues of him at different times in his life. So you can see he wasn't, at all shy about showing himself. This is actually in the same courtyard. You can see the stuff I was showing you in the lower right of this picture. It's often been that rulers want to, in some way, tie themselves to the ancient Egyptians and their majesty. And so, a little above and inside the temple, you can see the Abu Haggag Mosque. And this is, again, the same courtyard, just a little different position. Another portion of the temple had been converted into a Christian church following Roman occupation, and that was actually just a little past the part where Alexander the Great had declared himself pharaoh. There was a lot of getting up early in this part of the trip. The next morning, we left our ship at 4 a.m. to take a hot air balloon ride over the West Bank, associated with death and the afterlife. And this was one of the best experiences on the trip. Absolutely enlightening. You could really see how the funerary monuments and temples were grouped together. In the front of this photograph are nobles' tombs. The temple there is Hatshepsut's temple, right there in the middle. And up just beyond this bluff here is the Valley of the Kings. So they're grouped quite closely together. So after we landed, it was time to start exploring, of course. And it was just ready for a long day as we were rolling out at maybe 7 o'clock. And so we started with the Colossi of Memnon, and as you can see, there are still hot air balloons in the air at this point. For about 200 Egyptian pounds, that's about 11 bucks, you can get a ticket to see three tombs in the Valley of the Kings. For 200 more pounds, you can take pictures. And this is one from the tomb of Ramses IX. And as you can see, the polychrome is really well preserved, just absolutely wonderful. It's really dry. These things had been contained for quite a while, so you just don't find things like this elsewhere. For 250 additional pounds, so we're about 650 pounds here, you can enter the tomb of King Tutankhamun, and you can see the inside of his tomb, including his mummified body, one of his gold sarcophagi, and some wall paintings. But you can't take pictures, so I can't show you that. In all, we're really talking about 36 bucks, so that's quite a steal. So after visiting Hatshepsut's tomb, which you already saw, her temple, we started cruising up the Nile. And so we're on the Rodimus 2 here, which is kind of old school, has a nice observation deck. And these are some shots that we took down for some hawkers who've tied onto the side of the boat and are yelling up to the people at top trying to sell them goods. Fortunately, this only happened the first day we were cruising. Um, so along the way, you can visit Ptolemaic temples. So they're newer. This is post Alexander the Great, but they're very well preserved. And so the temple of Horus at Edfu was preserved extremely well. You can see that the outer pylons, the front facade is in great shape. And as you get to the back of the temple, the inner sanctum is enclosed and the outer wall is still there. So you can really see what the old temple forms look like. The inner courtyards and the shrines are well preserved. And if you look, we're on the back side of the temple now. If you look way back out here, you can actually see that there's even a larger mud brick enclosure that encloses the outer wall, which encloses the inter shrine. So this thing is just in absolutely fantastic shape. Our next stop was the Temple of Komombo, which is a rare split temple to Horus and Sobek, the crocodile god. In the second photo, to your right, you can see a stepwell where priests made offerings to crocodiles, and where several mummified crocodiles were found and can be viewed in a nearby museum. We'd been independent in Cairo, but we joined up with a small group in Luxor. And we really hit the jackpot getting absolutely great companions, all excellent travelers. And I'd really like to thank those people, starting from left to right. Art, Maria, Olivia, Colin, and the Panetta family on the right. Charlotte, Davi, Amy, Vincent. You guys were just fantastic companions. We really appreciated the insights, the experiences. Thanks very much. This is our temple of Philae boat ride, and once you get there, you're at a temple of Isis that's built on an island. It's extremely picturesque, but off in the distance here, from the back of the temple, that's the original island it was built on. It had to be moved higher after the large Aswan Dam was built, and it was painstakingly moved brick by brick, a real treasure to go check out. A number of Nubians and Nubian villages were also displaced with the building of the dam, and we had a chance to visit one Nubian village in the evening. And the Nubian villages are set up with some really nice shops, great people. Here you can see some of the spices that are on display, and it had a really different feel from anywhere else we had been in Egypt. Um, the colors are noticeably different. Um, Vibrant, even though some of the shapes are the same. The clothes were quite different. The people were very friendly, noticeably darker skin, and the food was really different. So this is a little sampler with breads, and to the left, going up this way, we're looking at first halwa, which is a crumbled almond paste, black molasses for dipping, and a really salty water buffalo cheese with olives in it. It was a wonderfully different day. Our last site on this portion of the trip was a trip to Abu Simbel. And this is another temple that needed to be moved when the dam was built, a giant temple built by Ramses II. We had to get up at 11 p.m. That's right, you heard me right, 11 p.m. the previous day to get into a giant military-led convoy traveling to the south. It took a little over 3 hours once the convoy got going. You can see my picture in the upper left of some of the craziness. It was the solar festival day where the light illuminates the sacred chamber just after dawn. And as you can see, it was crazy crowded. Um, Getting to see this thing, I could see some details that haven't really been quite as apparent. Like, you always hear about how his favorite wife shown at Ramses' feet there, Nefertari, is quite small, but she's actually very large compared to you. Or on the right, he was a military conquering pharaoh, and you can see the local Nubians subdued and conquered, tied at the neck. Unfortunately, it was way too crowded, and it was a little bit of a mob scene. And so I couldn't get to the back of the temple while the light was moving. It had also been a bit cloudy, so there's probably only about 10 minutes where that was happening. But I did get this great shot afterward where three gods are illuminated, and the goddess Ptah of darkness is not illuminated. It's a really amazing temple. Um, throughout the trip, it did feel at first a little awkward seeing all of these big guns and constant checkpoints. But being just a few miles from the border of Sudan, you could really see that this was an investment in making sure that tourists are safe at the various sites that people are taken to. And so we really got the feeling that Egypt is doing all that it can to make sure that it brings tourism back as strongly as possible. Next time, back to Cairo, and then on to Jordan and the very famous Petra.